Hello and welcome to Grown and Flown. My name is Stephanie Meade and I am an independent educational consultant, which means I practice college counseling in private practice. My company is the Collegiate Edge and my team and I are based in Los Angeles, but we work with teens and their families from all over the country and even around the world. Welcome to this talk, which is going to be about college admissions, decisions, options, early action, early decision, regular decision, and how to decide what is right for you and your teen. So why this topic? First of all, there's just so much talk about early applications. And I think this is, everybody's hearing it. The terminology can be very, very confusing, as well as sort of meaning and impact of these different paths. So that's why we wanted to spend a few minutes on this. But before I get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to just remind you of the big picture of the college admissions landscape. Let's not lose the forest for the trees. And so what the big picture is that in some ways, there has never been a better time to apply to college in the US. And this is mostly just based on demographic trends, birth rates, and that kind of thing. And because of that, fewer students have been graduating from high school and applying to college in this country since 2011, and that number keeps going down. And colleges are businesses, their customers are students, so they need students in order to operate. So as a consequence, most colleges in the United States admit most of their applicants. As recently as a couple of years ago, the statistics told us that over 80% of colleges, four-year colleges in this country, of which there are almost 4,000, admitted more than 50% of their applicants. So really important to remember that this is a very favorable environment in which to apply to college. You might be thinking, wait a second, this is not how it feels to me. This is not what my friends are saying. This is not what I'm reading. And that is because there is a small group of highly visible colleges where acceptance has been getting more difficult. And that tends to take up most of the oxygen in the room in terms of what you are reading about in headlines and that kind of thing. So, but the big picture is things are looking good for college applicants. So early applications are an important part of this whole conversation, but they aren't the whole story. So I'm going to start with like a glossary. Just let's go through the terms and make sure everybody understands what all these different application option terms mean. So first of all, remember that not all schools have all of these options. I can't think of a single school. Actually, there is no school that has all the options I'm going to outline. And some schools will just have one, some will have a combination. So that's really important that you have to consider first whether the colleges your student's interested in even offer these different types of application programs. So the first one is what we call regular decision. That's the one that's been around forever, maybe the one that you remember most prominently if you're a parent and from the time that you applied to college. That's the standard path where the application is due usually in January, could be February or March, and all of the admissions decisions are rendered around the same time, usually March, April, and then everybody has until May 1st to decide where they want to go. That's regular. So, and pretty much all colleges, with a couple of exceptions that I'll mention, have regular decision in addition to these kind of other things I'm going to explain. So one of those other choices is called rolling admission. And that's a process by which applications are reviewed as they come in. Colleges don't wait till they have them all in a pool and make decisions on the pool. They make them as they come in and release the decisions as they go along. Sometimes those admissions decisions can come as early as August of the senior year. And what's nice about that is it's great to get an early win early in the process. It can reduce everybody's stress, and a student may even decide that they can take some of the other colleges off their list if they've gotten into one of these schools rolling that they're really excited about. Another application option is early action. So what this means is that students apply early, meaning earlier than the regular decision, and it's usually November 1st or November 15th, and they hear back from the college early. Rather than March or April, they hear back generally in December or January. Early action is not restrictive. Students can apply to as many schools early action as they want to. Of course, the school has to offer early action. It's not binding in any way. It allows students to wait until they hear from all their schools, compare their admissions offers, and not choose one until generally May 1st. There are three possible outcomes from that early response in December or January, which is yes, we've admitted you. No, we are not going to consider your application further. And what's called a deferral, which means your application will be considered again in the regular round. So basically the answers are yes, no, or maybe. So why early action? I personally love early action, and I encourage my students to do as many early action applications as they can. For one thing, it gets them going earlier and they get the process completed earlier instead of dragging it out for months and months. The other thing is that as you start to get these decisions and see which options you're going to have, it just gives you more time to consider those options, maybe really look deeply at the financial aid offers you're getting, maybe visit some of the colleges, and I think overall reduces stress because you just have a lot more time to make your decision. Early action does not necessarily confer any kind of advantage. There's not necessarily an admissions boost. There might be a slight advantage because colleges just recognize that a student who applies early might be excited about them. But if there is a boost in admission, it's going to be small. And again, it's going to be inconsistent. All of these things vary across colleges. Now, by contrast, we have early decision. So early decision has a lot in common with early action. You apply early, usually November 1st or November 15th, and you hear back early, almost always before the winter holiday break. So usually sometime between December 15th and 20th or so, those early decisions come back. The difference here is that students can only apply to one place early decision, and that is because it is binding if the student is admitted. So what that means is if the student applies early decision and the college says, yes, you are admitted, the student is bound to attend and must withdraw their applications from all the other colleges. With an early decision application, the student, a parent, and the high school college counselor all have to sign an agreement saying, we understand that this is binding and that the student will have to go if they're admitted and will have to withdraw their other applications. Now, the one exception to that binding nature is that if for some reason it turns out that you can't afford it, the financial offer from the college is not what you were thinking it was going to be, and you can't afford it, you can be released from that binding commitment. However, what we encourage families to do is get enough information that they're never in that position, because that's pretty rough for everybody. And again, the outcomes, just as with early action, can be yes, no, or defer, meaning we'll review you again in the regular pool. If you're not a yes, if it is a deferral, the student is released from the binding nature of that commitment. So what are the pros here? Why would somebody do this? The main reason is that early decision can increase the odds of admission at some schools. And that's because early decision is good for colleges. They like it because it makes sense, right? Because they only have to admit one student to get one guaranteed admit instead of maybe having to admit 10 to get one guaranteed admit. So it's beneficial for them to have those students kind of locked down early. So in exchange, many colleges will give a slight boost in admissions in that early decision pool. The second positive is that there's that one and done certainty. If the student is absolutely sure this is their school and they love it and they get in December, they're done, it's quite wonderful. One little nuance to this kind of whether it's easier to get in on early decision is that it's really complicated. There are a lot of statistics out there you can find about published rates of early decision versus regular decision, and that can be somewhat confusing. It may appear that it's literally twice as easy to get in early decision as regular, but it's a bit more complex than that because those early decision numbers are often inflated by the fact that special populations, such as athletes and in some cases legacies, who were going to be admitted anyway, have been required to apply in that early pool. So the boost is going to vary widely from college to college and not apply equally to everyone. So just a word of caution about that. Figuring that out from the stats can be really tricky. So that is early decision, or what we call early decision 1, because there is also something called early decision 2. Everything about early decision 1 is true for early decision 2, except for the timing. The deadline for early decision 2 is usually in early January. And that can be, but same thing. You can only have one application in play at a time. If you're admitted, it's binding, all that stuff. This can be useful for students who do find that there is that one perfect school that they want to apply to, but they don't figure it out quite by November. The other place early decision to is used is sometimes students will apply early decision to one school. And if they're not admitted to that school, they can then apply early decision to a second school, essentially having kind of two bites at that ED apple. But again, you cannot have more than one ED application in play at once. So that ED2 can only happen after the ED1 is a no or a deferral. So that's ED. And then there's just a couple of other admissions plans that I just want to briefly mention because you may run across them. One is sort of what's a single date admission. So there are colleges that don't do any of this fancy stuff. No rolling, no early action, no early decision. They just have a single deadline by which everybody's application is due. You see that in some of the large public systems, University of California, University of Texas, University of Washington. Other systems have this one deadline. There's some private schools, University of San Diego, Gonzaga, for example, have a single deadline. So you will see that some places, and those are schools that are just kind of not kind of playing all these complicated games. And then the last thing you might see is only true for a tiny number of schools, about a dozen out of the 4,000 or so, which is called single choice early action or restrictive early action. This is available at only a few highly visible schools. It is non-binding, but there are limits placed on whether students can apply early, even early action, to other schools. It tends to be highly restrictive and not offer much advantage for the student because it's not that binding, and can be pretty emotionally tough if the student is deferred or denied because they've been prevented from applying early elsewhere. If that comes up in your research or in a school your student is looking for, please go to that school's website and read those policies carefully because they can be tricky. And then again, as I said at the beginning, of course, we've got regular decision. So now that you know what these are, how to decide whether, as I said, I recommend early action for everybody as much as they can. So the decision is really whether or not ED is the choice. So just a couple things to consider. The first thing to consider is love. And what I mean by that is, does the student love the school? And my test for that is to ask the student, okay, I want you to imagine that you're admitted to every single school on your list. If that is the case, do you, without a doubt, without hesitation, choose this one school? If that's the case, then psychologically, that's potentially an ED choice. Second thing to consider, of course, is costs. Run those net price calculators ahead of time. There are some colleges that will offer a financial pre-read and give you an estimated financial aid package if you're considering ED, not all, but some. But basically, you need to answer the following question: can we afford this without the ability to compare offers? Because if you wait until you get all of your decisions, you can compare the financial aid and merit offers, but you don't have that luxury with ED. So that's an important question too. Another thing to think about is strategy. Not all schools are really ideal choices for early decision. For example, if the student is absolutely going to get into this school no matter what, and they don't need that bump of early decision to ensure that they're going to get in, then why apply early decision when you can still wait and compare all your offers? At the other end of the spectrum, if the school is such a reach that the student has no chance of being admitted, early decision is not going to change that. And then that opportunity to apply early decision has essentially been wasted. So it needs to be a school that is a bit of a reach, but is a realistic reach. And then just finally, remember that the advantage, while present for some schools, is going to vary a lot by school and may be smaller than you think because of all the things I mentioned before. So just to final thoughts on this, about these early action, early decision, early applications in general, they can be very helpful, but they are not magical. I want to encourage you to focus first on fit and second on strategy. I want to support you in not buying into the pressure that you may feel in certain circles and certain schools. There's just so much conversation about early and you have to apply early and all this kind of thing. Many students, probably most students in this country, succeed without early decision. I have many students every year who don't apply early decision. It's a tool, but don't feel pressured to use it if it isn't right for you and your family. And as always, encourage your student to apply broadly to a range of schools and make sure that you help your teen find schools and colleges that will love them back. Good luck and try to enjoy the journey.